IVM.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories. Hope you're all well and are getting ready to wrap up a very eventful 2022. On our final episode of the year, we take you to India's small but mighty state of Goa as we talk about the concept of Susegad, the art of contentment, with author and podcaster Clyde D'Souza. We discuss everything from the homes to the food, from music to spirits, celebrations to siesta, and much, much more. As a part of this finale, we are also giving away 3 copies of our guest Clyde's book based on this very topic of Susegad. Make sure to listen to the episode and answer 3 simple questions linked in the Google form shared in the show notes section to stand a chance to win a copy of Clyde's book. All the best and hope you enjoy the episode. So with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Clyde D'Souza, author of Susegad, the Goan Art of Contentment, and now host of the podcast, Susegad Stories from Goa. Clyde, thank you so much for being on the Musafir Stories and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you for inviting me on your brilliant and absolutely inspirational podcast. It was one of the benchmarks that we had when we were starting our podcast as well. And I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Clyde. It's definitely an honor for us to 3x author and now podcaster, Clyde, right?
Right.
And for me at least, Clyde has been a way of diving deep into Goa, just beyond the beaches and the music and the lovely vacation vibes that Goa gives everybody. Just getting a chance to deep dive beyond that. Clyde's book and his podcast has been a great way to do that for me. But Clyde, the intro I gave at the beginning was very, very brief and concise. Why don't you speak a little bit more about yourself and your experience with the podcast too?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, I mean, I have been writing for as long as I can remember now. Susegad is my 3rd book. The first 2 were very casual and fun, and they were takes on, believe it or not, the first one was called Kissing Ass, the art of office politics. And it showed you how to, traverse the maze of corporate life. The second one was called Ghanta College, which was about, again, dealing with college life and all the ups and downs that go along with it. And the third one, the one that's closest to my heart and, to everything that I love, is basically about Goa and its lifestyle. And the word that we have used is Susegad, which is a Portuguese Goan word, which means sosegado. Its actual translation means peace and quiet. That's the word that it comes from. So the book is about that and about how you can kind of achieve this susegad that everybody yearns for whenever they kind of land on the shores of Goa. And of course, so that's the book, which, you also briefly touched upon. And then last year, we launched a podcast called Susegad Stories from Goa, which again aimed to take our audience beyond just, like you said, beyond the bikinis, the beach, and the booze of Goa, which, of course, yes, is fine and we all love it. But there's so much more to the tinier state of India, which brings the maximum happiness, not only to Indians, but, to people from all around the world. And the podcast was an attempt to kind of get the stories from Goans themselves, the Goans who are striving to make Goa what it is, whether it's in the fields of food or drinks or festivals or heritage. So we kind of touched upon all of these topics. So while the book was, let's say, like a starter course to, getting to understand and know Goa, the podcast is a live, interactive, conversational piece that helps anyone who's in love with Goa, anybody who wants to travel to Goa, who has it on their to-do list, to kind of understand more about the state that I love, the state that I was not born into, but that makes me feel at home.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely make sure to link the podcast to in the show notes section of the episode too. And yeah, I think I'm throwing. I said no bouncers, no curveballs, Clyde, but I'm throwing a little bit of a surprise right away. We're also doing
Sure.
a giveaway of 3 copies of Clyde's book, Susegad Goa Out of Contentment, as a part of this episode. So, listeners, do make sure you take part in that contest as well. And Clyde, I think we start off usually the first question of the bat when we start off is where you're taking us to. But yeah, this time I think there's no surprises. Goa is where we'll be going to. But tell us a little bit more about your Goan connection, where you're from, and yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. So yeah, so the people from Calcutta, they have a word, it's called Prabashi Bongs, right? Which is basically Bengalis who are not born in West Bengal, but who have lived outside. So I don't know, there's no such Goan term for it. I guess the closest Goan term, Konkani term, would be Bhaile. Bhaile means someone who's from outside. Okay, it's sometimes it's said in a slightly condescending, derogatory way. But I was not born in Goa, but I've always grown up going to Goa, feeling my roots over there culturally, ritualistically, from a point of view of how I've been grown up. So I've been going to Goa all my life, ever since I was a kid. And my ancestral home is in a tiny north village called Colvale. It is now a little bit famous. It's on the global map because Wendell Rodrigues is used to be one of the villages from there in Colvale. And we used to live in this lane called the Sant Rock Lane. I didn't know what it meant, but it was Sant Rock, which is the Saint Rocky. So I'm from that village, as in my ancestral village is Colvale. After that, it was too sleepy and too quiet for us. Now something that I yearn for, but because it was so quiet, we kind of moved to Candolim, which is very noisy and now a bit too noisy because of the the footfall of tourists. But Candolim is lively, it's bouncy, it's energetic, it's got real pace and real zest to it. So yeah, that's my connection is basically ancestral. It's cultural. It's some place that I go back to as often as I can. That's my connection to Goa.
Yeah, wonderful. And Colvale reminds me, we've done a couple of episodes on Goa previously as well. And one of the guests on that episode too had mentioned that I think his favorite place to live, he mentioned is Casa Colvale, right? That happens to be a property in Colvale. So that's the first connection that I could make when I heard about this too. So yeah, really looking forward to exploring Goa, like you said, beyond the bikini, the beaches, and the booze. But before we jump into more specifics, would you also like to give a brief history? Just history and the influence, because culturally as well, Goa is so rich and has such a diverse cultural background, right? Right from the people who've been associated to Goa, ruled Goa, etc. It's very rich that way. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely been colorful. I mean, its history, as with many places across the world, and you know this as well as me, considering your podcast delves into so many various places in India. So yeah, Goa does have a very rich, a varied, colorful melting pot of cultures, and its history has definitely been eventful, to say the least. And if you have to go back, I mean, we can keep going back, but like I say in my book, if you go back long enough, Goa was the land of dinosaurs, as was most of the earth, I'm sure, right? But right from about maybe thousand years ago, 1,500 years ago, I think it was ruled by the Aryans, then the Mauryas, then the Kadambas. These were all royal monarchs of India. Then for a pretty long time, it was ruled by Adil Shah, right, the Mughal emperor. And then, of course, the Portuguese landed on the shores of Goa by ship. And I think that was the first conquest, what they call the conquest, happened sometime around 1450, if I'm not mistaken. And they kind of beat the Mughals, and then the conquest of Goa started, the colonization, so to speak, which went on for about 450 odd years. Right, so 450 years, I think, as a Portuguese, not only a Portuguese colony, but pretty much a Portuguese state.
Yeah.
Goa was, and it had an indelible impact on Goan culture, lifestyle. Not only the Portuguese, but I think a lot of the previous rulers also had their mark left on Goa. What is interesting though is that a lot of the Goikars, what they call Goikars, still maintained a lot of their culture, their lifestyle, in spite of so many different rulers that Goa kind of went through. in spite of 600, 700 years. A lot of the village lifestyles, the village way of life,
Hmm.
from whether it's growing paddy fields or kazans of Goa, the lands of Goa, how they transferred property, or how Goa kind of was self-sufficient in terms of the village life, that somehow continued in spite of so many different rulers. And that's the interesting part. And then of course we fast forward to the present, where it is now rightfully ruled, or governed rather, by India. So yeah, it has been a colorful way of life, and it has attracted a lot of people, especially because of its slightly luso European sensibilities, the Portuguese influence, architecture, maybe even habits, its language. It's a nice melting pot, and I think a lot of people, especially tourists, people who are not from India, it might even be looked upon as, okay, let's get that European feel and let's go to Goa. Of course, a lot of that is changing now, but so that's been this brief history, if you may call it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a good introduction, and also ties in well with a lot of the things we'll come across, right? Right from be it the food or the language influences and stuff like that. More so from the Portuguese lens, I guess, given that they were the ones that were most recently tied in terms of. Goa being one of their colonies. And yeah, one of the facts that I somehow missed early on, and I mentioned this in the other Goan episode too, is that Goa was still under the Portuguese well into, I think, early 60s, right? Well after
Right.
India's independence. So that's why it's very, very, that recency bias is there. I think that a lot of the things we tie to Goa is Portuguese, but yeah, they definitely are a very intrinsic part of the overall the Goan culture as well. And eagerly looking forward to exploring that more. But yeah, the $1 million question, I think we'll want to dive in a little bit deeper into is, yeah, tell us a little bit more about Susegad, right? That word might not be for the layperson, they might not be very familiar with this. You did briefly touch upon it in the introduction, but tell us a little bit more about Susegad and how this has come into being so integral to the Goan way of life.
Yeah, it's quite funny. It's a really good question that you asked me, and I know many of your listeners, many of the audience may not have heard this word before. It's a very Goan word. If you go to Goa and you ask any local, or if you see two locals talking, the greeting that they generally give each other, they'll say "Ko hi," as in "How are you?"
Hmm.
You know, and the response would typically be "Susegad," "Sogle Susegad," which means everything's peaceful, everything's nice, everything's just as it should be. So that's the kind of feeling that Susegad evokes from people, and that's the meaning of the word. Like I mentioned, it's from a Portuguese word called sossegado,
Hmm.
which means peace and quiet. And very oddly, I mean, just to tell you a small anecdote, how Susegad came into my life and how it helped me, especially with the book and with the pandemic. What happened is that obviously it was 2020, everything was locked down, pandemic hit, there was nothing to do, all of us were stuck at home, and I randomly, honestly, got a call from my publisher at Random House
Hmm.
and at Penguin Random, and they said, "Hey, listen, we have this idea, we have this concept, for a Goan book, and we want to do something around this word called Susegad." And I said, "Okay, wow." And so then, and that kind of led me to explore various topics on how all of us can find peace and balance and quiet in our lives. And it was like divine intervention. It came to me during a time where all of us were stuck at home with
Yeah.
nothing to do, and I kind of myself experienced Susegad while writing the book. So Susegad saved me during that time when we were all going a bit crazy, right?
Yeah.
And Susegad also, I should tell you that Susegad in Goa, if you say Susegad, it's also linked to laziness,
Mm.
right? So again, Susegad is also used in a derogatory manner slightly.
Hmm.
When someone says he's too Susegad, he's too lazy, he's too laid back,
Mm.
right? That's so they also mean it in a like, hey man, you're a bit too laid back, right? But so what I'm trying to, but yeah, so what I've tried to do is I'm trying to reclaim that word. I'm trying to reclaim Susegad to mean more about balance and doing things consciously, not about doing things fast or slow, but about doing things with imbalance, let's say. So yeah, that's the meaning of the word Susegad, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a feature, not a bug, right? As
Yes,
a
right.
tech person would say. But yeah, lovely. For me as well, I definitely did come across that connotation that, hey, it's like laid back, that. But I think it's definitely way more than that, right? It is that state of being content, which is not necessarily being lazy, being content,
Yeah.
being at peace. It's almost that state of mind. And you've also beautifully showcase that in the book through various examples, right? Susegad can be in what you do, Susegad can be in the food, Susegad can be in the celebrations, right? So it's a state
Right.
of mind. It's much beyond that just being laid back and being lazy, like you said. So one of the things I wanted to start off the conversation and explore Susegad more is by going into the different aspects of a Goan lifestyle as well, right? Because all of those definitely have that element of Susegad in them, whatever they may be, right? From the homes to the food to the people to the community, everything has that element of Susegad in it. So why don't we begin a little bit and explore through your lens and through your experience living life in Goa, through your visits, through your connections back there, of these different things. Starting off by tell us a little bit more about what a typical Goan home is like, right? What are the different features? Because again, tourists are all limited more to the most part to the city circuits, to the beach circuit, right? Pretty much limited to the shacks and stuff like that, and we don't
Yeah.
quite think into like, hey, what's a village life like? Is like, what does a typical Goan home look like, be it architecturally or functionally, even, right? Utility wise. So, can you shed some light on a typical Goan home?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So, yeah, a typical Goan home is, to use those two words again, is typically Goan, which means that a lot of people might call them Portuguese homes, or they might say they are slightly European in their architecture, which is partly true, but not entirely true. Right, so the old Goan homes that all of us see while we are, on our little bikes winding down some village in Goa and looking at them, with fascination. So some of the typical aspects that one might see of an old Goan home, okay, would be, of course, first is the laterite stone, which is this red stones. And of course, some of them would be painted for sure, but they're not kiln bricks, but they are these huge laterite stones. So that's found in abundance in Goa. So one of the key mark features of old Goan homes is this laterite stone that they use for their walls and the columns, right? And then another feature that one might see in a lot of Goan's home is the balcao. A balcao is the balcony where you have these stone seats out in front, out on the porch, and they are sometimes nicely designed, sometimes intricately designed, and they have this double feature of providing a filter for your guests. So if you did, Goa is very villagey in that sense, and still in the villages, if people are walking by, whether it's a gossiping auntie or maybe it's just a stranger who's passing by, you don't call them into your house, but you'll kind of wet them at the balcony, and only then, if you're maybe interested in in the gossip that they're providing, there's a Konkani term for it. It's called gozali. Gozali means gossip, right? So that is generally done at the balcao. So that's balcao is a typical Goan, feature of Goan homes. And then you have, of course, the Mangalore tiles. They're called Mangalore tiles because I think they come from Mangalore. So they're these nice sloping red roof tiles, pretty high. And you'll generally also see most homes will have a cock or a rooster on top of the roof of the house. Yeah. So that's another architectural feature. And then, of course, there's the design aspect of it. Even from the nameplates, you have these tiles which are calligraphy tiles. They're called azulejo tiles. Now, while one might think that it's Portuguese, it's actually not. It's more Arabic. It's more from Turkey and Istanbul and all of these places. That's where those tiles came from, because, of course, like I mentioned, the Muslims did rule Goa for a significant amount of time, right? So there was that influence as well. So the tiles are actually more from the Arabic influence. So there's the azulejo styles, which are these beautiful, mostly blue and white, tiles that one might notice on old Goan homes. So these three features are there, and then of course there's the well. Almost every home in Goa now, there's of course running water and tap water, so you don't use the well so much. But in the past there was this well. Yeah, so these are some of the interesting things. And of course the word that a lot of people use for Goan homes is casa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which means home. So yeah, so that's why casa Colvale and casa everything in Goa.
Yeah, all of these very interesting features, right? And thank you for pointing those out. One other thing, also, I'm sure you'd like to shed some light on is the beautiful, really, you could say, ornamental and airy windows and some of the
Yes,
features,
yes.
right? Do you want to touch upon that, Clyde?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So the windows are something that honestly amazed me as well when I started diving into, all of these design elements of Goan homes. So obviously at that time there were no fans or ACs. So it was very inventive and very innovative what Goans did, or maybe someone, I don't know who's the architect who came up with it, but it's genius. So that the windows are large and airy, they're well designed, but if one looks closely at the panes of the windows, they appear almost translucent white, right? So what they are indeed is actually mother of pearl, right? So mother of pearl is something that you get in your oyster shell,
Yeah.
right? It's a kind of a lacquer. So this lacquer is then kind of used as window panes between the window frame, and that's why you see this kind of almost shell-like structure that forms the inner of the frame of a window. And the reason they do that is so that the light can also come in,
Yeah.
when it's dark inside the house, and it's also airy. It gives this sense of airiness to the home.
Yeah.
So it provided two aspects. It looks beautiful, and yeah, it was functional. So yeah, that's a very interesting aspect of Goan windows. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Soul Traveling is one of the traveling or local companies that you covered on the podcast as on your podcast as well, and they do
Yes,
some
yes.
heritage home trail within Goa. So for somebody who's interested in exploring Goan homes, I would definitely recommend checking these out, and also you'll appreciate these features much more when you do a tour like that.
Absolutely.
One other and also unmissable aspect of the home is the kitchen of the homes, right?
Right.
And kitchen and the food of Goan homes. That's also something that really was enjoyable to me as a reader, as a listener of the book. Do you want to perhaps give the listeners a sense of what the typical Goan diet is like, a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, some of the things that form the most common elements of like the staple diet of Goans, if you may?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So again, I'll just start out with how I've started with the book. I've kind of first I go to the Goan, the Konkani word for it. So like I said, home was casa, and food is jeon, right? So jeon is what is the Konkani word for food, and Goans love their food, and they are huge eaters of heartwarming, hearty food, which is basically a rice, a curry, good bread. So the bread in Goa is called poi, and they come in many types of shapes and sizes and names that they have. So if I have to kind of tell people what is the day, the day diet of most Goans, it would be in the morning there's poi, had with generally a very light tea. Okay. Well, it's called like black tea. So the old Goans will not mix milk in it. They'll just have like a nice, light tea with their poi, because Goa tends to get kind of hot and balmy,
Sure.
right? So if you have strong tea, obviously you'll sweat a lot. So they have a light tea with poi, and then in the afternoon there's typically parboiled rice, which is brown rice, or ukre tandul. That's what Goans love. It's the rice with the husk, so it's unpolished rice, which is now seen as healthy,
Right.
right? So yeah, they did that because it was very agricultural driven, and there was a lot of rice growing in their own fields, and they did a lot of backbreaking work. So it made a lot of sense for them to eat that rice. Of course, today it might not be the best diet, but still you will find definitely Goans loving their rice. And I know of uncles, not me personally, but my uncles, they have like a mound of rice. It's like a little hill.
Yeah.
Right. And on that, then they'll pour a good amount of kodi, which is curry, and typically the curry will be a spicy curry, or it could be, but some of it would be coconut based, some of it would be a spicy curry. There would be ingredients like kokum that would be added to the curry. Of course, both exist, which is vegetarian as well as non-vegetarian. Goans are huge seafood lovers,
Sure.
given that we have a beautiful coast and lots of rivers, you know, with seafood plenty. So there's all kinds of fish, from seafood to river fish, local fish that is made. One of the very popular fishes is something called bangla. I don't know if you've heard of
Sure.
bangla, which is
Yep.
mackerel, right? So bangla resha is one of my favorites. It's basically stuffed fish, and resha is this very red chili, spicy masala. I don't know if you've had it, but if you haven't, then you should. It's got vinegar and it's got red chili. One of my favorites. So typically, one might have rice, curry, and maybe a side, fried fish, along with it. Then of course there's siesta time, where you sleep for a couple of hours, and people in Goa still do that, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's really great. It's like, yeah, the shops will just shut even now.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the tourist belts might not, but if you go towards the south, and if you go to regular villages, it's just shut. That's it, where we're sleeping. So sleeping is also part of the diet. The siesta is also part of the diet.
Yeah.
And then evening again, maybe a cup of tea and poi, and you'll hear the ponk ponk of a poder. The poder is the baker who will come riding on his cycle, and you'll still see them all across Goa. The bakers, the poders of Goa, who still supply a lot of the bread to everyone in Goa. So you'll see the guy typically on his cycle, and he'll have this basket on his the carrier, sorry, behind,
Yeah.
which is which has a blue tarpaulin on top of it, and then he'll come outside your doorstep. He knows who his regular customers are. There's the pong pong pong, which is the sound of the horn that you hear, and you'll see kids or aunties or uncles running to their gates, taking their daily fix of poi, whichever fancies them, and having their tea, or maybe even their dinner along with it. Dinner again probably is just light, but I mean, it's interesting that a lot of Goan food that we all talk about, these days, is chicken kafrial, or we'll talk about reshad masala, or we'll talk about prawn balcao. Yes, a lot of these things capture our imagination because they were of European slash Portuguese descent, and like with all things that happen in India, is that we're kind of fascinated a little bit with European culture, right?
Sure.
So fair enough, a lot of these food items became perhaps more popular than Goan native cuisine itself. But there is a huge unexplored part of very, very untouched by Portuguese cuisine that exists in Goa, whether it's the Bahujans tribe, which is in the interiors of Goa, or the Saraswati God communities, which also have their own delicious finger licking food. And there's this very interesting thing that happened with cuisine, obviously with colonization. Is that obviously the Portuguese wanted to kind of enforce their way of life,
Right.
right, on the natives. So they would do many things, and for a long time growing up, I did not know that this was because of the Portuguese influence. So, for example, when in my family as Goan Catholics, when we cook food, okay, or when we cook rice, sorry, when we boil rice, we put salt in the rice while boiling it. Okay, and it's only while growing up when somebody told me, why are you adding salt to the rice now? And I said, that's how you do it, right? And then I was told, no, you add the salt later. So I don't know if I mean, I don't know, growing up for you, was it the same, or but then I understood that the Portuguese wanted to change the habit. So they said, they insisted that whoever was converted into Catholicism had to do these little things, whether it's adding salt while boiling the rice, or whether it was maybe adding wine instead of vinegar. So a lot of native Goan cuisine add vinegar to their curries, whereas maybe the Goan Catholics would add wine maybe to their curries. So there are these very interesting elements. Of course, it's all part of now history, whatever it is, good and bad. But yeah, it had its influence on Goan food.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I have to keep repeating myself, but all of this has been very beautifully captured in the book. And like I said, it's not just dry that, hey, this is what the food is. It's also like tied back into these little stories, little personal experiences and anecdotes and stuff like that. So that is.
The mango murder mystery. Are you talking about the mango murder mystery? I don't know if you read that.
Yes, I did. Which Inspector Mankurad solved. Is that
Yeah,
the one?
yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
so happy when somebody reads it and you actually remember the name. Mankurad is a very famous mango for
Yeah,
people
I
who
think.
might not know.
Yeah, definitely. This story, or even the story, Curly Shack, or the Curly. I think it was
Yeah.
Curly and
The
the
turtle.
Ridley
Yes,
Shack,
yeah.
right?
Really shack.
That,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
actually went into a little bit of a rabbit hole. Just for the context to listeners, there's a beautiful, again, all of these are little fictional stories to capture in the elements of Goa and Goan way of life that Clyde has beautifully captured. But yeah, this one is tied to I think one of the first hippies in Goa, right? Eight Finger Eddie. It was based on
Yes,
a character
yes.
was based on Eight Finger Eddie,
Yeah.
and I started looking into it further, and I also found the connection that Eight Finger Eddie was one of the pioneers who started this tradition of the markets,
Flea
right? The flea
markets.
markets,
Flea
exactly,
markets,
in
yes.
Anjuna especially, right?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
that was also like really great. Like all of these topics, I mean, you might hear them in isolation from time to time, but tying all of them together and presenting these, right, be it like these through these stories, the little stories in the
Yeah,
book, or through even personal interviews, right? You've also interviewed some
absolutely.
really
Yeah.
iconic Goans, I could say, right? From a creative sense, from what they've contributed to overall, not just to Goa, but to the broader, to the country and even to the world. Like a lot of those things, right from Remo Fernandez, the very popular Goan that most of us know, to some of the names we might not know as much, but given the contribution, right, to, for example, I forget the names, her last name, Sonia, the Fado singer,
Shirsat, yeah,
Shirsat,
the father
yeah.
singer, Shirsat,
So
yeah.
people like that, I really, really have to appreciate your effort in bringing all of them to the fore, Clyde, because
Thank you.
again, we like simple things. Na mangu sona chandi, right? Na mangu
Yes.
hira moti, mere kis kaam ke, the very popular song from the movie
Yeah,
Bobby
yeah.
that a lot of us would have heard about, is actually tied to a traditional Goan form of song and dance, right?
Yes.
So things like
Yeah.
that, really, really, I think it's called Dekhni, right? We'll definitely touch
Yes, it's
upon
called
that.
a Dekni.
We'll
Yeah,
touch upon
yeah.
that too. And but yeah, getting quickly back into what we were discussing about food, right?
Sure.
One of the very, very important elements of the Goan way of life, and
Yeah.
mangoes, I think, was one of the things that stood out for me. And Goan mangoes are also very, very popular in that sense beyond India. I mean, beyond Goa, across India as well,
Yes.
right? So, do you want to touch a little bit upon the different varieties of mangoes that a Goan would enjoy?
Yeah, sure. So there's a very interesting story about the mangoes in Goa. Now, I mean, some say that of course they were, brought by. They were of course native to many parts of India, but some varieties were grafted by Portuguese priests who had a love for mangoes and they loved the sweetness of it. But some of them found it perhaps too sweet, so they started grafting them, and therefore a lot of mangoes in Goa were named. Some were named after Portuguese priests. So there is the Mankurad, which is not named after a Portuguese priest, but it's a Goan word which means slightly miscolored. So the color is basically not good. That's what it means, Mankurad. So you'll see a brownish, reddish, golden kind of hue to the outer skin of the Mankurad. It's perhaps one of the tastiest mangoes I've ever had, and I love mangoes. So Mankurat is right on top for me. So if anybody is going to Goa, it comes only during the summer season, of course, and that too in the months of April, I think, is when you get the best Mankurats. It's beautiful cinnamon honey tasting mango. So that's one of the mangoes. Then the other mangoes are also named after many people who grew these mangoes. They grafted them. So there is the Fernandez mango, right,
Hilario, I
which
think
was
is what
grown
you're
by,
referring to,
yeah,
right?
there was
Hilario
Hilario,
Fernandez.
yes,
Yeah.
Hilario as well, yes. So the Hilario Fernandez mango, and various homes, whoever kind of perfected a certain mango, the mango was then named after him. So the Alfonso mango, of course, is again named after someone called Alfonso. Uh, but I think it was named after Alfonso de Albuquerque, who was
The Duke of Goa. Yeah.
the Duke of Goa.
Yeah,
So
that's also
that was
very popular
the
across like other parts of the country too, right? The
yeah,
apus
and some
that's
of the
spoken on.
best,
Yeah.
absolutely, the Apos, yeah, and now some of the best Alfonsos, of course, grown in Ratnagiri and not so much in Goa, but the name remains.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have a wide variety of mangoes, and like you said, I've tried to keep the book. It's like a layer, 3 layers of the book, I would say, like how the Bibink has 7 layers. My book has perhaps 3 to 4 layers. One is the non-fiction layer, the second is the fiction layer, the third is the interview layer, and the fourth is the doodles, the doodle layer,
Yes.
right? So,
While you briefly touched upon bibink, the layered, the layered dessert of Goa, I think that's a beautiful segue to actually jump into some of the very. I mean, some of them are well known, some of them are not very well known, and I would love for more people to know about these desserts of Goa as well. If you'd like to call some of those out, Clyde.
yeah, sure. Yeah, desserts are also very, very fond of in Goa, and a lot of people they have to have a dessert after their meal. It's like almost like a ritual, So most of them are very milk based, coconut based, and one of my favorites the desserts is bibink. It's written as bibinka, okay, and some say that it was named after a nun. And the myth, we don't know. There's so many stories, honestly, and they're all very interesting. One of the stories is that there was a nun in old Goa, in the Santa Monica cathedral, which right now I think is also home to the Museum of Christian Art in Old Goa. So they used to wash their habits, bleach their habits rather, with egg white, right? So she did not know what to do with the remaining yolk of the egg. So again, necessity is the mother of invention,
Right.
as it is with everything. And so she came up with this dessert, which is with maida, with egg yolk, lots of sugar, caramel, and it has 7 layers, and it takes about 6 hours to make. And again, like I said, Susegad came to my help, and after eating bibink and loving bibink for many, many years of my life, I finally made bibink myself last year with the help of a very dear friend. And it took me about 6 hours to do it, but it is the most delicious, sumptuous dessert that you can have. uh, so yeah, bibink is again, a very, I think it's a very Portuguese derived dessert. It's probably not native to Goa. Then the other dessert is which goes back to my grandmother, and she used to make this, and she used to make this, I think, pretty much for the entire village. I honestly think
Wow.
that, because given the size of the pot, or the cauldron, if you could call it that, that she would make it in. It was so huge, and it's a sweet called dodol. It's generally made before Christmas. It's a lot of coconut milk. It's a lot of jaggery, and I think it's got some milk, perhaps. Yeah, I'm not too sure about the ingredients, but yeah, mainly it's jaggery and coconut milk, and it's stirred for about, depending on the quantity that you make, it's stirred for about 4 to 5 hours till it becomes this lovely thick halwa, brownish, dark brown colored. And I remember as a kid always waiting for the dodol to be poured, and as soon as it was poured, we'd attack it and have it, like, super hot. So dodol is again another lovely Goan sweet. Then there is another sweet called pinag. Pinag is maybe the drier version of dodol, I would say. It's made with a lot of jaggery and perhaps coconut, I think. Yeah. So these are my top three.
Yeah, definitely. And one other, perhaps one other facet of the book that we missed out is Clyde also dishes out some wonderful recipes along the way, right? So
Yes,
if
yes,
all
yes.
of the things we mentioned is not enough of a pull for you, there's also recipes in there, and who doesn't want to perfect the art of Goan food, right from I think desserts to your curries and everything. So
Yeah. Some of my favorite ones,
yeah.
some of the ones by my aunt, some of the ones by my grandmother, whatever they've handed down. Yes, I've kind of put them down. So yeah, if anybody loves this kind of cuisine, it's right up their alley.
Yeah, wonderful. And also one of the other things, obviously, after dessert and of all of the food is the spirits, right, of Goa. Those are also very, very unique and
Oh yeah.
have carved out their own niche. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the very popular Feni and Urak, the popular drinks of Goa?
Yeah, sure. So Feni is native to Goa. It's an alcoholic spirit. It's a clear spirit that was probably brewed way before the Portuguese. From what I understand, from what I've been talking to a lot of Goans, even my understanding is growing. And when I spoke to Hansel Vaz, who is the founder of Casulo Premium Feni, it's a beautiful Feni that he makes. He distills in artisanally, I would say. So he kind of mentioned to me that Feni goes back way beyond the Portuguese, and initially it used to be made with coconut palm, right? So that's what the ancestors used to distill, and they used to have. And at that time, of course, it was a way to alleviate the hard work, the toil of labor, which was generally in the fields. So they would kind of use it to yes, like rah rah and cheer on and get on with the day's work. And then when the Portuguese came down and they brought the cashew nut, it proliferated in Goan soil. It took to Goan soil beautifully. Maybe the temperature, the climate was perfect for cashew. And then came along cashew feni, which today is very popular in Goa and even outside Goa. It's perhaps the only Indian liquor which has a GI tag,
Yeah.
which means that it cannot be made anybody anywhere else in the world except Goa. So that's an interesting thing. Cashew feni is nice and spicy. Coconut feni is the sweeter version of it. And I don't know if you've ever had it. Have you ever had it, Seth?
No, unfortunately, I don't drink. So for me,
Oh,
all of
okay.
this is like learning more about it. And like even the fact that all of this is made from cashew apple, right? Basically, anything
Right, it's
other
the
than the
cashew
nut,
fruit.
right? The cashew nut that
Absolutely,
everybody eats,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
everything other than that.
Yeah, yeah. So the nut actually grows outside the fruit. It's called something in agriculturalists call it something where the nut is not inside the fruit, but it's outside. So you'll see the nut kind of hanging below the fruit, and it's like a plum pear shaped kind of cashew apple, which is then squeezed, stomped upon, and then the juice is brought out, and then that juice is distilled three times. The first distill is what is called urak, which is the first distill actually is just the juice is called nero, which is just the juice. It's just cashew, cashew apple juice, which is a nice, light, refreshing juice that can be had in the summers. And the first distill is then called urak, which is a lighter form of feni. That is something that the interesting story about that is that it's always had in the summers to kind of cool you. It's like an internal air conditioning that happens to your body. That's what any Goan will tell you. Any Goan who loves feni will tell you that it kind of just cools your temperature down. And a lot of people also say that it will only give you a high when the breeze hits you, when the sea breeze hits you. Otherwise you won't feel. So I don't know about that, but yeah, some people say that that's what urak does. And urak is a very lighter version of feni, the first distill. And then the distills after that, the third one, which is then after, if it's kept for a few months, it then becomes feni. So feni is a very spicy, pungent drink, and for people who've not had it, they might not take to it so instantly. But for Goans who've kind of grown up smelling cashew trees all around them, or like me, roasting cashew nuts in the background, and also maybe having the fruit, with salt, it has a different kind of connection which one loves. So yeah, feni is the drink that Goa has given to the world, much like maybe
Yeah.
tequila or champagne, which are global spirits now.
Yeah, I was also completely blown away by learning about this GI tag that you mentioned, right? Basically, it has to be
Yeah,
cashew or coconut that is grown in Goa for it to be called as feni. So, yeah, a lot of
absolutely.
things we learn through the book as well to kind of broaden our horizons a little bit more. And fikr not for non-drinkers like me, there is always solkadi, right? The drink from kokum.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah, yeah.
this really exciting thing I heard about. I really have to try this out. Something called as Joffy. Tell us a little bit more about that, Clyde.
Right, sure. So two things. So first is kokum, of course, on my last trip to Goa when I take an annual well water bath, and lo and behold, right next to the well there was this huge kokum tree growing, and I have to admit I had never seen one before, a kokum tree, but it's this lovely huge tree, and it has these vines, and it looks like a plum, the kokum, and it's nice and pinkish and reddens your fingers.
Yeah.
So kokum soul curry is a lovely, refreshing drink that you can have. And Joffee is basically a coffee made out of jackfruit seeds. Yeah, I never knew that as well. But for people who can't, let's say, have cocoa, or don't want caffeine, it's like a decaf
Yeah.
version of coffee. There is coffee made out of jackfruit seeds. So again, quite inventive and innovative. So
Yeah, definitely has
yeah,
to be
I
a
have to
first.
admit I've not had it as yet,
Okay.
but I do intend to when I can.
Yeah. First time I'm coming across anything like this. So for people who might prefer a non-alcoholic drink, there's definitely a couple of options you could try out. And also an important part of the overall culture. I mean, Goa or otherwise, important part of the village life is the community, right? And the festivals around it. And Goa has a bunch of very, very interesting festivals that Clyde mentions in the book too. And no, we're not talking about sunburn, right? Not sunburn Goa. There's
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
very, very innovative, inventive, whatever you'd like to say, really, really heartwarming experiences, all of these that you mentioned. You want to touch upon a few of the popular festivals that are also, some of them very, very unique. I think maybe even specific to Goa, right? I haven't heard of these across in my other travels or in my home state either. Do you want to touch upon some of those?
Absolutely. So I would say Goa is like the land of festivals, again, because of so many cultures that existed over there, and maybe because of their agrarian village nature. There was always a need to kind of, yeah, I think that holds true to a lot of India, which is agrarian and village by nature, that they need a reason to, they understand the impact of seasons, they understand the impact of nature. So there's always some reason to pay respect or to celebrate nature, and festivals are kind of the route to do that. So a couple of festivals that exist that I can tell you about is, there is this very interesting festival that is celebrated in a place in Marcel in Goa. It's called the Chikol Khel. Okay, Chikol, as we all know, Chikol is mud, right? So Chikol Khel is mud play, and it's where they kind of just roll around in mud and play in the mud, and it happens outside a temple, outside the Devaki Krishna temple in Marcel, where they pay respect to those deities, those gods. And part of that festival is where a lot of the men will basically jump around and play around and roll around in mud, and then fruits and vegetables are perhaps thrown to them or at them. And it's a very interesting, very unique festival that I don't think happens anywhere across perhaps the world. So that's one festival. And then the other festival, which is of slightly Portuguese descent, which also maybe did exist in its native form, is the San Jao festival. Now, the San Jao festival is Saint John the Baptist festival, and Saint John was the guy the guy who baptized Jesus. So that festival has taken its a very unique Goan form, where a lot of Goans at around that time, on June 24th, if I'm not mistaken, is when they do the whole baptismal ritual themselves, but it's done in a very fun manner, where they'll jump into a well, right? So everybody jumps into the well, and then again it has other influences. So the newly married men, okay, or a newly married man has to, his father-in-law will perhaps throw a bottle of Feni into the well, and now he has to go and collect it. Only if he does collect it will he get food
Okay.
from the in-laws. Maybe that's made up, but it's all fun that has happened. So Sanjao is a very unique festival. They'll wear these kopels, which are these head flowers on their heads. The women will, have a basket of fruits, which she will again give to her new groom if he manages to collect that bottle of Feni. So across wells in Goa, now even swimming pools, as usual, with the passage of time, we kind of move
Right.
to perhaps more convenient ways of celebrating things. So while some people still do the whole well jumping thing for Sanjao, a lot of people also jump into pools, and then there are boats that come across rivers which are beautifully decorated. So Sanjao is another beautiful festival. Yeah, these are the two festivals that I can think of, and
Yeah.
there are many more. I mean, almost every second day is a celebration of something or the other in Goa.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, if you haven't had, or if you are still looking out for newer types or unique types of festivals and celebrations to be a part of, there is a whole section in the book that's dedicated to the festival man of Goa, right? Who's done a
Yeah,
variety of
absolutely.
festivals, very unique ones as well, right from, let's say, something like a festival of plants and flowers or the boat parade and stuff like that, right? So there's so many of those.
Yes.
And another one that I also found really interesting was I forget is it called Sotria Fest, the festival of umbrellas,
Yeah,
basically.
umbrella. Yeah, Chotre
Oh,
festival. Yeah,
okay. That's the connection.
yeah.
Okay, and what I was leaning on or leaning towards is that festivals are also closely tied with music, right? Music is also a very,
Hmm.
very integral part of Goa and Goanese culture, and I was also like literally mind blown, Clyde, learning about all of these different things, the different types of music and songs that Goa has, right? Beyond the popular ones, obviously, Yaya, Mayaya, or Maria Pitache, all of those. Remo Fernandez has
Yeah.
made a lot of them popular and taken those beyond Goa to India and to the world. But do you also want to like shine a little bit of light on some of the different art forms or even forms of music within Goa?
Yeah, sure. So again, some of these aspects of music go stretch about 500 years old. There are stories of Goan women singing songs called avios. It's probably one of the oldest form of singing where they while they would grind their masala because they were alone, lonely, and to kind of alleviate their boredom, they would sing these songs which were lamenting of their younger days, their childhoods maybe, and they're called avios, if I'm pronouncing it right. So there's that form of music. Then there are deknis, which are a Konkani form of song. Then there is the dulpods, which is a faster rhythmic song by nature, which are again a lot of very dancey and very uppy kind of thing. And if a lot of people, especially tourists, if you've kind of gone to Mandovi River and you've probably been on one of those boats where they have this typical touristy thing where they'll take you down the Mandovi River, you'll see these dances and these songs being performed, right? So there is the dekni, there is the dulpod, there is the mando, which is a slow, very very slow form of a very romantic but almost melancholic way of singing. And one of the very popular songs is Tamre Rosa, which means basically rosy cheeks. And it's sung by, I think, a father who's he's seeing his daughter going to her husband's home, so he's singing that your rosy cheeks and the tears are falling down your rosy cheeks. So this is a beautiful mando that's sung, and these are very native to Goa. Then there is a slightly more Portuguese import, which is the fado. And the fado is again beautiful style of singing. And there is this lady called Sonia Shirsat, who's one of, I think she's one of Asia's best fado singers. She's called a fadista. That's what they're known as. And again, they sing these beautiful, romantic, and they'll make you cry kind of songs. And she does a live performance almost every 2 weeks in Panjim in a place called Madra Goa. And I've mentioned about that in the book as well, and hopefully in my season 2 she'll be on the podcast as well. So there are all of these styles of music that we've not heard of, right? Whether it's the mando, which is the slow style, idyllic kind of form, or whether there's the dekni, which is a more faster version of music. And then there's Remo Fernandez, and then there's Chris Perry, and there's Lorna, who's right now a legend. She's called the Nightingale of Goa. She's about 70 plus right now, and she still sings. There is a movie made on her, where we see her life, and she was romantically involved with this other music composer called Chris Perry. There was a Bollywood movie actually made kind of inspired by their life. It's called Bombay Velvet. Uh, yeah,
Interesting, yeah.
so yeah, and even the song "My Name Is Anthony Gonzalez,"
Exactly. From Amar
right,
Akbar Anthony. Yeah.
from Omar Akbar Anthony. The Anthony Gonzalez is actually a Goan composer the Bollywood composer looked up to. And the song was an ode to Anthony Gonzalez, who was a Goan composer. So yeah, it's quite a very rich and fascinating music history. So again, I think I've mentioned a few songs which I like, and are there in the book. So yeah, there's my YouTube playlist, which is my go-to, and I use a lot of Goan songs in my Insta reels as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for again showing us. For a lot of us, again, for a layperson, it might have been Remo Fernandez, right? That would be all. And he's great, right? He's definitely taken it
Yes.
to a different level on the world stage. We're not even talking about India, but even beyond that, learning about these different things and their connections, and also makes it so relatable and just makes the experience worthwhile. As we start to wrap this up slowly, would you also, from your perspective, literally, you could say the heritage of Goa, the Goa beyond the
Mm.
beaches and the booze and the bikini and the parties and the music, all of that? How do you see, from your perspective, the future of Goa lies?
Sure, yeah, it's a great question, and like with so many places or countries or states, there's always a that change is the only constant, right? So while Goa had a period of the Luso-Goan culture, now it's having a very strong Indian culture. So we have to really now decide which way and what are the things that we want to preserve, what are the things that we want to continue keeping, what traditions do we want to keep, and what traditions do we maybe want to let go of. And even there's this very interesting sentence that this historian Sanjeev Sardesai Goan has said, and it makes a lot of sense that he said that Goa is the tourism in Goa is by default and not by design. So that's a very interesting sentence, I thought, and I think it's right now up to the stakeholders of Goa to kind of see where it goes, culturally, because a lot of the things that we spoke of, a lot of the things that we kind of like about Goa are very nostalgic. They're romanticized, right?
Mhm.
Um, but the current Goa cannot be just nostalgic and romanticized. It has to live in the present. So uh, a lot of the things that maybe Goans used to like, that might become obsolete right now, right? So how do you kind of maybe take that to the next phase, or more interestingly, what can Goa become beyond the tourism aspect of it? Can it become the creative hub of Goa? Because right now there are a lot of creative folks, especially after the pandemic, who have moved to Goa and who have set up their homes there, right? And they are kind of working from Goa. There's no WFH but WFG that's happening, right? So that's being done by a lot of people. So can it become like this, the creative community of India, of not only maybe India but of the world? Can it become maybe the culinary capital of India as well, which is also happening in Goa? There's a lot of experimental cuisine that's happening in, let's say, Asagao, for instance, which is which is a village in North Goa. So it's an interesting time, and I think while we all love the touristy aspect of it, uh, there could be a completely new Goa that might come up in the next 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, it's definitely something, and like I said, the different stakeholders have to work towards it and come to some sort of an agreement. But either way, in our eyes, Clyde, you're one of the real heroes in terms of documenting this, capturing this, and also showing this to the wider world. Definitely thank you for that. And if I may take the liberty, for all the listeners who are trying to experience the Susegad, right? I'll leave you all with these few beautiful lines that Clyde has used in his book as well. Just for anybody who's imagining or want to think about Susegad, these are the few lines. Close your eyes, wherever you may be right now. Imagine yourself on a recliner. Imagine the sound of waves lashing against the shore, the breeze caressing your face as the aroma of a tangy curry floats over from the beach shack behind you. Everything else melts away. Time stands still, and you seem to be suspended in it. You wish this feeling could last forever. Yes, that's a typical peaceful holiday feeling. But in Goa, whether you're on a beach or in a quiet village, it's a feeling called Susegad. It's a feeling you get when you're completely relaxed in a blissful place wherever you wish you could stay forever. Thank you so much for the lovely conversation and for the lovely book and the podcast series, Clyde. And yeah, like I said, it has been an honor chatting with you. And for all the listeners to definitely check out the book as well as the podcast. Season 2 is on its way. So it's
Yes.
the right time to binge on season 1 and catch up on the book as well. So you're ready and prepared for season 2 and the lovely interviews and personalities that Clyde will be bringing on to his podcast. Thanks again so much, Clyde. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Seth. I mean, and honestly, it's been an honor and a privilege for me to be on your podcast as well. You do a wonderful job, and both of you do a great job of bringing India to listeners across the globe. So honestly, it's also been a privilege for me to be having this conversation with you. And thank you for those kind words, and the narration that you just did of the book is spot on, and yeah, it just literally took me to Goa in a flash. So thank you for that, and thank you for this conversation. I hope your listeners enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Thank you, Clyde. And like you say, Mogasu to close this off.
Mogasu.
That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.